Srinivasa Ramanujan's life presents a striking paradox. On one hand, Western academia celebrated him as a prodigy whose work touched the highest peaks of mathematics. On the other, it categorically refused to accept his own explanation for where his ideas came from, the blessings and revelations of the Vedic goddess Namagiri Thayar. The difficulty was not simply skepticism over a personal claim. It was the product of deep philosophical differences, cultural biases, and even subconscious ego within the Western intellectual tradition. In Vedic philosophy, knowledge can come through multiple valid channels: Pratyakṣa, or direct perception; Anumāna, or logical inference; Śabda pramāṇa, or authoritative testimony, including divine revelation. Ramanujan's mathematics, according to his own account, came through the third, divine revelation in dreams. The Western post-Enlightenment worldview, however, had narrowed its proof standard to just perception and inference. Revelation was discarded as a relic of the pre-scientific past. Thus, even if the content of Ramanujan's visions could be verified in theorems, the method of obtaining them remained unacceptable. To the Vedic mind, truth is truth regardless of the channel. To the Western scientific mind, the channel defines validity. This epistemological mismatch meant that his goddess could never be acknowledged as part of the proof. Accepting Ramanujan's explanation would mean admitting that the human mind, however trained, might be incapable of reaching certain truths without divine assistance. This undercuts a central pillar of modern Western academia, that knowledge is earned by intellectual labor and universal method, not bestowed through spiritual grace. If one man in India could leap directly to deep results because a goddess revealed them, what would that imply about centuries of Western mathematical struggle? The answer was uncomfortable: that devotion, purity, and spiritual connection might sometimes outpace structured reason. This was a blow not only to scientific ego, but also to the cherished myth of complete human autonomy. The early 20th century was still an era of colonial hierarchy. Indian traditions, especially Vedic ones, were treated by the British as mythology, in contrast to Greek or Christian philosophical systems, which were taken more seriously as intellectual traditions. In this mindset, the goddess Namagiri could only be a charming superstition, never an actual explanatory factor in academic discourse. Accepting her as the source of mathematical truth would force a reversal of cultural status. Indian spiritual frameworks would be elevated to the same or higher legitimacy than European rationalism. In the colonial academic world, this was unthinkable. If Ramanujan's case were accepted, it would set a dangerous precedent for Western science, opening the door to divine or mystical claims in other areas of knowledge. This risked blurring the hard boundary between science and religion that had been carefully built after centuries of conflict between church and reason in Europe. To maintain the purity of the secular method, it was easier to isolate Ramanujan's claims as personal faith. Inspirational, perhaps, but irrelevant to mathematics as a discipline. Mathematics is prized in the West for its universality. A theorem is true whether proven by an atheist in Berlin, a monk in Tibet, or a schoolchild in Tokyo. Once divine revelation becomes a source of truth, mathematics risks becoming tied to particular gods, temples, and belief systems. Western academia feared that this would fragment mathematics into theological factions, as once happened with philosophy in medieval Europe. The safest way to preserve universality was to strip Ramanujan's work of its religious origin story, celebrating the results while ignoring the source. There is also a subtler point. Many Western scholars admired Ramanujan, but could not comprehend the devotional depth from which he worked. It was easier to translate his inspiration into terms they understood: intuition, genius, mystical sense, than to confront the possibility that a non-Christian, non-Western deity had directly participated in the creation of world-class mathematics. This was not merely skepticism, it was a cultural defense mechanism. Ramanujan's mathematics did not just challenge Western intellect, it challenged Western philosophy, culture, and even the sense of ownership over the story of human reason. His equations could be verified, his brilliance applauded, but his goddess could not be welcomed into the halls of Cambridge and Oxford without dismantling the very framework by which Western science claimed legitimacy. The West's refusal was a blend of epistemological limits, cultural prejudice, fear of precedent, and the quiet ego of civilization, all converging to keep the Vedic gods outside the realm of acceptable academic truth, even when their handiwork lay plainly on the chalkboard.